A structure set up by the Trump administration allows them to go through the asylum process in the United States. They're fleeing Venezuela and Colombia and Cuba.
I thought that President Trump made them wait in Mexico for the asylum process.
Not for these countries. That would be, for example, immigrants from Mexico. They're processed on the other side of the border. But these are countries where the Trump administration specifically designated that they could seek asylum in our borders. They've come here for that reason.
Okay, well,
during his last term, Trump gave the Venezuelan immigrants asylum here in the United States. When he was speaking to the migrants in Florida, he said, "Thank you for being here."
David fled into Venezuela's treacherous southern jungle. Eventually, David reached Brazil, where he was welcomed with open arms. Today, David lives in exile in the United States, where he continues to speak up for the Venezuelan people. And I want to especially thank the Venezuelan exile community that has done so much to support President Guaido, to organize aid for their compatriots, and to do just a lot back home. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you. We're with you.
Trump speaking to Venezuelan immigrants in the audience in Florida, he says, "We are thankful that you are here. We are with you." Now, this is after they stirred up the whole civil war situation there in Venezuela. Then you got all these Venezuelan immigrants coming for asylum in the USA, and he says, "We're thankful that you're here."
And I want to especially thank the Venezuelan exile community. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you. We're with you.
Now, he said that to the Venezuelan immigrants during his last term, and watch how all these immigrants are coming from Venezuela, and this is who the gangs are, quote unquote, that they're now demonizing to say, oh, these Venezuelan gangs are coming.
This is part of a mass exodus from once oil-rich Venezuela. According to UN data, 7.7 million people have fled the country since 2015.
And I want to especially thank the Venezuelan exile community. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you. We're with you.
Well, this has become a national story. The supposed takeover of some Aurora apartment complexes by a violent Venezuelan gang.
And we've got to be tough, because if you see what's happening in Aurora, Colorado today, did you see that? Where Venezuelan gang members have taken over parts of the city. They've taken over apartment houses.
Marisa, police here in Aurora, Colorado tell us they do not believe that there is any gang takeover here at the Lowry Apartments, the Edgett Lowry Apartments, which are right behind me, as some on social media have purported. Now, this all deals with Tren de Aragua. They are a well-known and powerful criminal organization from Venezuela.
The city of Aurora is contradicting itself on the extent of Venezuelan gang activity in that city. The mayor told Fox News this week the gang is collecting rent at a troubled apartment complex. The interim police chief, in a video press release, says that's not happening.
I'm not saying that there's not gang members that don't live in this community, but what we're learning out here is that gang members have not taken over this complex. We've really made an effort to the last few days to just really ask the specific questions and the direct questions in terms of the gang activity and who's actually making sure that people aren't paying rent to gang leaders or gang members, that's not happening. And we've discovered here today and yesterday talking to so many residents that that's not the case.
Uproar about it. They think the Venezuelan gangs are coming to take us over. Well, Trump's the one that told them they could have asylum here. He's the one that granted that. He's the one that said he's glad they're here. And then they come, and now he's using them as a scapegoat for the kickoff of this Rex 84 plan.
President is granting temporary legal status to nearly 500,000 Venezuelan migrants who are already in this country.
The king of Alfred Plan, the United States of America King Alfred Plan, codenamed Rex 84. Here's what it says, and I'm going to read quickly. In the event of widespread and continuing and coordinated racial disturbances in the United States, King Alfred, at the discretion of the president. In other words, when the president of the United States, not Congress, not the House, not the Senate, not the House of Representatives, not the Senate, when the president declares this emergency, it's to be implemented immediately.
And Trump said these Black Lives Matter protests constituted an emergency in his opinion, and that it's the federal government's job in an emergency to go in and start clearing out the cities.
It's not our job, unless in case of emergency, which I consider now to be an emergency, it's not our job to go in and clean out the cities. It's supposed to be done by local law enforcement.
Now, this is all a setup. That was a dry run. And that was instigated by provocateurs. I'll show you that.
Dubbed the Umbrella Man on social media, he was captured in this viral video breaking windows at this AutoZone, dressed in black, holding an umbrella. In a court filing this week, police identifying him as a white supremacist. According to court documents, the man also spray painted the words "Free Expletive for Everyone Zone" on the business's doors. Not long after, looting and fires began in the area, police say. An officer telling the court, until Umbrella Man, the protests had been relatively peaceful. This individual's sole aim was to incite violence.
But don't you see how that's a dry run, how this civil unrest provides the emergency for the government to go in and start clearing out the cities?
In 1982, there was a guy named Oliver North. Y'all have heard of him, right? Oliver North and Ronald Reagan got together, and the two of them amended the King Alfred Plan. And their amendment became known as Rex 84 because it was signed by Ronald Reagan in 1984. Now, the original plan was signed by Lyndon Baines Johnson, but Ronald Reagan amended it to include the Hispanic population. Originally, it was, what we're going to read, it was just written for blacks. But in 1984, Oliver North and Ronald Reagan amended it to include the Hispanic and Latino population.
And the catalyst that's going to kick all this off are these 500,000 immigrants from Venezuela who were welcomed here by Trump and given asylum here. And now they're the ones that are being blamed so that they can use that excuse. Oh, look at all these migrants from Venezuela. Use that to kick it off, to start rounding up everybody else.
Participating federal agencies, what are they? National Security Council, what else? Central Intelligence Agency, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Department of Justice, Department of Defense, Department of Interior. Participating state agencies, what are they? National Guard units, state police. Participating local agencies are what? City police and county police, that's right. And all of these other groups will be deputized by the federal government to round up blacks and Hispanics for encampment. Chairman, National Security Council. Next memo, preliminary memo from the Department of Interior. Under King Alfred, the nation has been divided into what? 10 regions this country's been divided into for the purpose of implementing their plan. In case of emergency, notice what it says. Minority members. What people? Minority members. Now again, this has been amended in 1984 to also include Hispanics now and white sympathizers. Minority members will be evacuated from the cities by federalized National Guard units, local and state police, and if necessary, by regular units of the armed forces using public and military transportation, read it now, what does it say? And detained in nearby military installations until a further course of action has been decided. Now, here's a note, Zero Committee report, and this was called the Zero Committee, and of course talking about zero population. Survey shows that during a 6-year period, production created 9 million objects. What in the world is that? Or 1.5 million each year. Production could not dispose of the containers, which proved a bottleneck. However, that was almost 20 years ago. And remember, this was done in 64. 20 years before 64 is 44. 1944, 1943, 1944, that's when the Holocaust took place, y'all, in Nazi Germany.
Yes, yes.
And what happened was the furnaces that Hitler used to burn these people weren't hot enough. So when they start throwing the bodies in the furnaces, the bodies weren't burning up fast enough, and it caused the furnaces to get clogged up. So notice what this report says. We suggest that vaporization techniques be employed to overcome the production problems inherent in King Alfred. What does that mean? Well, as a result of the recommendation, they began to build what we call high volume or nuclear-powered trash incinerators. And these incinerators burn 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Y'all listen, steel, depending on the kind of steel it is, melts between 2,600 and 2,700 degrees. Now, if steel will melt at that temperature, why do you need a incinerator that burns 5,000 degrees? So that the furnaces don't get clogged up again. Now, I know it's not good news. Preacher, I didn't come here to feel sad today. Hey, if you don't know, you're going to really feel sad. Because the biblical text says it this way, my people are destroyed because of a lack of knowledge. Don't say it can't happen, people. Don't say it can't, because on February 21st, 1942, Executive Order 9066 was implemented. And on February 21st, 1942, every Japanese American in this country was arrested and detained. And the law stated if they were 1/16 Japanese, they were to be locked up too. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, our west coast became a potential combat zone. Living in that zone were more than 100,000 persons of Japanese ancestry. No one knew what would happen among this concentrated population if Japanese forces should try to invade our shore.
Io Soto was just 19 in 1942 when her family was forced to leave their 20-acre farm in Mather.
We were given 10 days to get ready.
And what were you told?
That we could take only what we could carry.
They were brought to a Japanese internment camp 170 miles away in Pinedale, California, and were among 120,000 other Japanese Americans imprisoned at these camps for more than 2 years.
I don't say it can't be done, but what you must understand is the most important point here is that your government is depending on you being ignorant. Did y'all hear what I said? They're counting on our ignorance to implement their program. The point is almost here where the President of the United States will issue his order for the emergency.